The crowd roared with anticipation, the electric hum of excitement rattling through the walls of the sold-out arena. Flashing lights danced across the sea of faces, their expressions locked somewhere between disbelief and exhilaration. This was the night boxing and wrestling fans alike had only dared to imagine. A collision of titans from two worlds that thrived on blood, sweat, and raw charisma. Mike Tyson, the living legend of the squared circle, his fists once heralded as the most dangerous weapons on earth. And across from him, the defiant glare of Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Texas rattlesnake himself, whose very presence could whip an audience into a frenzy. It started as a rumor, the kind of wild fantasy whispered in locker rooms and speculated over by commentators desperate for the next big thing. Two men, each a juggernaut in his own domain, their paths never meant to cross, until a single spark ignited the impossible. An interview, casual on the surface, but laced with the kind of taunting that left audiences squirming in their seats. Tyson, ever the predator, had laughed at the suggestion that a wrestler, any wrestler, could last a minute in his world. Stone Cold, hearing the comments played back during a live taping, had narrowed his eyes with that signature look of disdain. It wasn't long before challenges were thrown, insults exchanged like blows, and the collision course was set. Promoters could hardly contain their delight, networks lined up with offers, and the public couldn't get enough of the brewing feud. But for Tyson and Austin, it was never about money or contracts. It was about pride. Tyson's reputation as the most ruthless boxer of his generation was etched into the annals of history. No one questioned his ferocity, his power, or his will to win. But wrestling, he dismissed it as nothing more than a sideshow, a circus act without the grit of real combat. Stone Cold didn't take kindly to disrespect. His legacy was built on defiance, on crushing the expectations of those who dared to doubt him. The ring, whether it was encased by ropes or surrounded by steel, was his battlefield. Tyson's scorn only fueled his fire. A press conference was hastily arranged, the media swarming like vultures around the two men as they exchanged venomous words. Tyson smirked, eyes glinting with that savage hunger that had left so many of his opponents broken. Austin only smiled back, his own confidence like iron. The match itself was a nightmare to organize. Boxing purists scoffed at the idea, claiming Tyson's skill set would obliterate anything a wrestler could muster. Wrestling loyalists shot back, arguing that Stone Cold's resilience and unpredictability would be Tyson's downfall. It was chaos, pure and simple, and the hype only seemed to grow with every new soundbite and confrontation. Contracts were signed under the flash of cameras. The stipulations were clear. A hybrid match, combining the ferocity of boxing with the brutality of no-holds-barred wrestling. No rounds, no time breaks. Just two men locked inside a ring until one of them could no longer continue. The date was set, the venue chosen, and the entire world seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Training camps were a frenzy of preparation. Tyson sharpened his already devastating power, his trainers pushing him to levels unseen even during his prime. His movements were like a blur, fists crashing against heavy bags with enough force to rattle bones. The speed, the precision, the sheer violence of his technique left everyone around him in awe. But beneath the surface, something else simmered, an almost childish excitement at the chance to prove himself against someone from an entirely different world. Meanwhile, Austin took to his own brutal regimen. There were no velvet ropes or pampered routines, only the gritty, bone-grinding workouts that had defined his career. He trained with wrestlers, boxers, and even mixed martial artists, each session meant to fortify his body against the storm Tyson was sure to unleash. Every punch he absorbed, every suplex he delivered, was part of a larger plan. His mind remained locked on a single goal, to prove Tyson wrong, to remind him that toughness wasn't exclusive to the world of boxing. The media couldn't get enough. Pundits debated endlessly about who had the upper hand, Tyson's destructive power and unparalleled skill, or Austin's unrelenting tenacity and unbreakable will. Both men spoke with the kind of confidence that only years of dominance could afford, and with each interview, each brief encounter that nearly erupted into violence, the world's fascination only grew. The night of the fight arrived, and it was as if the entire world had tuned in. Celebrities, athletes, and fans of both combat sports crammed into the arena, their eyes fixed on the ring where the impossible was about to unfold. Commentators struggled to keep up with the deafening roar of the crowd, their voices nearly drowned out by the anticipation thickening the air. It was spectacle and madness woven into a single moment, a flashpoint of history about to be written. Tyson entered the ring first, his gaze sharp and unwavering, the swagger of a man who had spent his life dismantling opponents with ruthless efficiency. His walk was slow, deliberate, the aura of intimidation he carried almost palpable. Every step was met with applause and jeers alike, but Tyson seemed indifferent to all of it. His focus remained locked on the task ahead, his fist clenched with the anticipation of violence. Then came Stone Cold, marching to the ring with the same defiant energy that had made him a legend. The glass-shattering intro of his theme music blared through the speakers, triggering an eruption of cheers so loud it felt like the stadium itself might split apart. He walked with that trademark swagger, eyes locked on Tyson with a ferocity that matched the boxer's own. Stone Cold wasn't here to play a role. He was here for a fight, and the air seemed to sizzle from the tension between the two men. They met in the center of the ring, the referee's presence almost invisible amid the clash of personalities. Tyson's glare was pure menace, but Austin met it with a grin that held nothing but contempt. The referee's instructions barely registered. Both men knew what was coming. Tyson's fists twitched with anticipation, while Stone Cold's fingers curled like they were itching to deliver a stunner at any moment. The bell rang, and the crowd's roar spiked to a fever pitch. Tyson lunged forward, his fists already snapping through the air like gunfire, while Austin ducked and weaved, refusing to be an easy target. The two collided with a force that seemed to ripple through the arena itself, their bodies crashing together in a brutal struggle for dominance. It was a clash of styles, a purebred boxer against a brawler who refused to play by anyone's rules but his own. Punches flew, grapples locked, and every moment felt like a heartbeat away from disaster. But just as the crowd began to wonder which man would seize control, something unexpected happened. Tyson's fist lashed out, missing its mark by inches, yet Stone Cold's grin only widened. Tyson's eyes narrowed, his fists coiling with the kind of precision that had dismantled world champions. Each punch was a calculated explosion of power, the jabs sharp enough to split air, hooks threatening to end the fight in a heartbeat. But Stone Cold refused to yield. His movements weren't as refined, his punches less technical, but there was something wild and uncontainable in his approach. Every blow he absorbed seemed to fuel him, each collision of knuckles against bone only intensifying that glint of defiance in his eyes. The crowd's frenzy grew with every passing second, their collective energy swirling into a chaotic blend of awe and disbelief. Tyson's strikes were relentless, each one thrown with the kind of confidence that had shattered careers. But Stone Cold fought with a brutality all his own, weaving wrestling techniques into the chaos. He slammed his shoulder into Tyson's midsection, using his body like a battering ram, and when Tyson retaliated with another furious combination, Stone Cold absorbed the blows and retaliated with a thunderous forearm smash that rocked the boxer's frame. No one expected the match to last more than a few brutal exchanges. The experts had predicted Tyson's fists would end things swiftly, while wrestling fans insisted Stone Cold's grit would wear him down. But as the minutes dragged on, it became clear this wasn't a contest anyone could predict. Both men were pushing beyond their limits, testing each other in ways they had never faced before. Tyson's precision clashed with Austin's unpredictability, the brute force of a boxer meeting the raw defiance of a brawler. And then it happened. Tyson slipped. His foot caught awkwardly on the canvas, a brief misstep that sent a shockwave of excitement through the audience. Stone Cold saw it in an instant, his instincts seizing the opportunity with ruthless efficiency. He launched himself forward, driving Tyson into the corner with a ferocity that left the crowd gasping. Fists, elbows, shoulders. He used everything at his disposal to keep Tyson pinned, hammering him with the relentless aggression of a man who refused to be outdone. Tyson roared back, shoving Austin away with enough force to nearly send him sprawling. But Stone Cold's smirk remained intact, the satisfaction of having rattled his opponent too obvious to ignore. Tyson's expression twisted with something darker, the frustration simmering just beneath the surface. He had come into the fight expecting to prove a point, to dismantle the so-called wrestler with the ease he had always displayed in the ring. But Austin was turning the bout into something far messier, refusing to play by any rules Tyson had ever known. The more Tyson attacked, the more Stone Cold retaliated with an unpredictability that bordered on madness. At one point, Tyson's fist thundered against Austin's ribs, the impact sharp enough to draw a strained grunt from the wrestler. But instead of retreating, Stone Cold only laughed, a low guttural sound that sent a ripple of surprise through the arena. Tyson's expression shifted, his gaze sharpening as if he were beginning to understand that this fight wasn't about skill or power alone. It was about will. The announcers struggled to keep pace with the chaos unfolding before them. What had started as a spectacle was rapidly morphing into something far more dangerous. There was no careful dance of strategy, no sense of control. It was raw, primal combat, the kind that left spectators on the edge of their seats, unsure if they were witnessing brilliance or disaster. Then, just when it seemed like Tyson was beginning to adjust to Austin's tactics, the unexpected happened. Stone Cold ducked a ferocious right cross, Tyson's fist slicing through empty air with the kind of force that would have laid out most men. But Austin was already moving, his body twisting with a speed that defied the damage he had absorbed. His arm shot out, hooking around Tyson's neck and pulling him into a crushing headlock. But it wasn't just any headlock. Austin had locked in his infamous submission move, the one he rarely used but had perfected over years of brutal encounters. The arena erupted with a mixture of cheers and shouts of disbelief, the sight of Tyson locked in such a hold as shocking as it was exhilarating. Tyson's muscles strained against the grip, his face contorted with fury rather than pain. He twisted, his arms lashing out to break free, but Stone Cold's hold was ironclad. Tyson's fists crashed against Austin's ribs and shoulders, the punches fierce and punishing. But Austin held on, his eyes burning with a defiance that went beyond the fight itself. The move wasn't meant to end the match. It was a statement, a reminder that Tyson was facing something entirely new. For a moment, it looked as if Tyson might actually succumb to the hold, his knees bent, his posture dipping under the relentless pressure. But then, with a sudden explosion of strength, he drove his body upward, ripping himself free from Austin's grasp with a force that left the audience breathless. Stone Cold staggered backward, his expression flickering between amusement and grudging respect. Tyson didn't hesitate. His fist lashed out with the kind of ferocity that had made him a legend, catching Austin squarely across the jaw. The impact echoed like a gunshot, sending Stone Cold reeling into the ropes. But even as the boxer closed in, ready to finish what he had started, Austin retaliated with a desperation-fueled kick that slammed into Tyson's midsection, halting his advance. They stood there, both men breathing heavily, their bodies battered and bruised. But the fight was far from over. Tyson's eyes gleamed with renewed intensity, his fists clenched with the promise of more punishment. And Austin, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth, only grinned wider. Yet, beneath the spectacle and the brutality, something far more dangerous was brewing. A rumor had surfaced, whispered by those who claimed to know the truth behind the match. Some said Tyson's camp had plans to sabotage Austin's preparations, to tilt the odds back in the boxer's favor. Others insisted Austin's promoters had their own schemes, setting traps meant to undermine Tyson's focus. But the truth was even more unexpected. Someone outside the ring was determined to ensure the match ended in disaster. And as Tyson and Austin prepared to clash once more, neither of them realized that their real enemy was lurking just beyond the reach of their fists. The roar of the crowd intensified, the kind of feverish energy that bordered on hysteria. Tyson and Stone Cold tore into each other with an aggression that left nothing behind. The punches, the grapples, the sheer force of their wills clashing. It was a spectacle no one could turn away from. But somewhere in the chaos, a different kind of tension had taken hold. Tyson's corner men glanced nervously toward the sidelines, their agitation growing with every passing moment. Stone Cold noticed it too, catching brief flashes of movement near the entrance. Figures who weren't part of Tyson's team were his own. They were too polished, too guarded, like security or something worse. His instincts screamed of trouble, but the fight kept pulling him back in. Tyson's blows came at him like sledgehammers, his eyes wild with determination. But the unease continued to build. It happened just as Tyson landed a thunderous hook that rattled Stone Cold's senses. A sudden commotion broke out near the edge of the ring. Security guards stormed the area, their faces twisted with urgency. Shouts erupted, but the fighters were locked in their brutal dance, oblivious to the brewing chaos outside the ropes. Stone Cold drove Tyson backward with a savage rush, slamming him into the corner. But even as he prepared to deliver another blow, his gaze darted toward the edge of the ring. There, barely visible between the bodies, a glint of something metallic. It wasn't a camera or microphone. It was a weapon. Tyson saw the flicker of panic in Austin's eyes and pressed his attack. But the wrestler's focus had fractured, his instincts warring between the fight and the unfolding threat. Tyson drove forward, his fists striking with renewed force, but Stone Cold's attention kept slipping to the chaos on the sidelines. Then, a gunshot split the air. The sound cracked like thunder, ripping through the arena's roar. The audience's cheers collapsed into screams of terror as people scrambled from their seats. Tyson stumbled backward, his face twisted in shock as the violence around them morphed into something far more sinister. Stone Cold's eyes darted across the crowd, searching for the source. And then he saw them, figures in black suits forcing their way toward the ring, their expressions cold and calculated. It was no longer just a fight. It was a hit. Someone had planned to take one of them down, and the chaos had provided the perfect cover. Tyson and Austin exchanged a glance, something beyond animosity passing between them. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than their battle. Survival now outweighed pride or victory. Stone Cold moved first, leaping from the ring and charging into the fray, his fists finding targets with brutal efficiency. Tyson followed, his rage turning outward as he fought his way through the intruders. The arena had devolved into madness, bodies clashing and crashing as chaos spread. But Tyson and Austin were more than just fighters. They were warriors, their instincts sharpened by years of conflict and struggle. And now, side by side, they tore through the attackers with a ferocity that left even their enemies reeling. One of the gunmen swung a weapon toward Tyson, his finger twitching on the trigger. But before he could fire, Austin's boot collided with his arm, the gun clattering to the floor. Tyson's fist followed, breaking the man's nose with a sickening crunch. There was no time for gratitude, only the desperate need to keep moving. The police swarmed the arena minutes later, their presence forcing the attackers to scatter. Tyson and Austin stood among the wreckage, their bodies battered but their eyes sharper than ever. What had started as a battle between them had turned into something no one could have anticipated. And while they had emerged victorious, the questions left behind were as daunting as the fight itself. Later, when the authorities questioned them, neither man could offer much insight. Whoever had orchestrated the attack had covered their tracks well. No names, no motives, only the scars left behind. But the incident had forged an unspoken bond between them, a respect born not from the fight itself, but from the chaos they had survived together. Tyson and Austin parted ways that night with little more than a nod of acknowledgement. They had faced each other's strength and fury, but it was the shared struggle against a common enemy that had left the deepest mark. Yet even as the arena's lights dimmed and the crowd's shock slowly faded, something darker lingered in the air. Because Tyson and Stone Cold weren't the only ones targeted. Whispers began to circulate about a conspiracy to eliminate the most powerful figures in combat sports. Weeks later, Tyson received an anonymous message, one that detailed how the attack had been orchestrated and why. His fame, his influence, and his refusal to bow to certain powerful figures had made him a target. And Stone Cold, his rebellious nature and unyielding defiance had made him just as much of a threat. The message ended with a single line that sent chills down Tyson's spine. They won't stop until you're both erased. It wasn't over. Tyson and Stone Cold had walked away from the fight with their bodies intact, but now they faced a threat far beyond the ring. And the only question that remained was whether they would stand alone or unite once more to take down whoever had tried to destroy them.